It's 11 a.m. All right, welcome. Welcome to our session. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Lisa Giesenbauer. I'm the president of Evolution Marketing, a certified B Corporation operating here in the state of Wisconsin. And today we are talking about something that is literally one of my passion points. One of the things that I'm beyond excited about. Oh, our slides are not up. I just realized that. Okay, hey Dorothy, can you share the slides? Dorothy?
I sure can.
All right. So we only have a couple slides. And this session is amazing because we have somebody zooming in from out of Wisconsin and we have folks in person. The session is being recorded, I believe. Dorothy's going to record it. So hopefully we can put this up on the WSBC website, post the conference for folks to watch. Okay, so why am I so excited today? I'm super excited because not only have I been involved with the planning committee for this conference today, and the session that happened in this room just literally 15 minutes ago was session 1 in a series of 3 sessions today about workforce development issues and strategies, tactics and tools, and tied to engagement. And I'm going to say all over workforce development. In my world, that's also called social sustainability. So all the things that we're talking about underneath that workforce track are tied in with the social side of sustainability, which maybe historically hasn't gotten as much exposure as when you think about sustainability, people have thought about environmental sustainability. But in this day and age where the roles we're all performing as folks tied to sustainability, whether it's the owner of a company or doing the marketing communications within a company, or it's maybe putting operational programs in place, all of that, they're all interdisciplinary, and we're now working across cross-cultural teams. So we're maybe working with engineers or Marcom people or legal, right? So this is kind of the new world of sustainability, which is why I'm so excited for this session and for our theme of 3 sessions today. Because what we're talking about now, it's the future. And it's happening right now. And so I applaud you all for being here today to join us, because hopefully you will take from this session strategies that you could put into place in your organization to help future-proof it. Because in the state of Wisconsin, I have a couple of statistics to share. In the state of Wisconsin, the unemployment rate currently is 3.1%. How many of your companies, by raise of hands, in this room are currently hiring for staff members? Okay, how many of you are having a challenging time finding staff members? Okay, even Kohler's having a challenging time?
Being honest.
That's great. But so you saw about half the people in this room are working at companies who are having workforce issues or challenges right now with recruitment. Now, you take that a step back and you say, what is recruitment? Well, recruitment ties back into engagement. And so as I said, we're talking about the social. Yes, Jesse, we are good to go. And Dorothy's recording. So recruitment ties back into engagement, which falls underneath the umbrella of social sustainability, because it's all really about people. So I told you about the unemployment rate in the state of Wisconsin. Dorothy, if you could do the next slide, please. You could forward it. Okay. Oh, so that's me. Hi, Evolution Marketing. We have a booth upstairs. Come visit us. So I wanted to, we have a slide here because I come from the B Corp community. And in the B Corp space, some of these topics people may not think of as being sensitive or challenging. But we also realize, I've been doing this work a really long time, and I'm a sociologist by training, that the things we're going to talk about today might make people feel outside their comfort zone. So what I've put together here, and this is actually from our B Lab US and Canada, and this is their meeting code of conduct. And so I'm just going to walk over here so I can read through these. I'd like us all today to think about our session, and I like to put these concepts in front and center, okay? So this is to help us all have a really great experience, and we're going to have an amazing conversation with our 4 panelists, but you as the audience are also part of this program too. So if you have questions throughout the day, please raise your hand. And I'd like us all today to lead with empathy. So appreciate others as human beings with abundant experience. We all have different types of experiences. Get comfortable with discomfort. If you hear something and you have a trigger moment, take a moment. If you need to leave the room, that's okay. Just take a deep breath and just listen and learn, right? We're here to learn, and we have to have these conversations. Value diverse perspectives, honor the unique experiences each of us brings, even and especially if it's different than your own. I think sometimes in the sustainability world, we get into our sustainability bubbles or maybe our compliance bubbles, and we forget that there's another world outside of that. Stay judgment-free of both yourself and others. Again, if you have a response, don't shame yourself, don't get upset at yourself. Take a deep breath, make a note, and keep listening and learning. Advocate for your emotional well-being. There's restrooms out in the hall. There's also a wellness space right out in the hall. So if you need to leave the room, that's okay. You can go to the wellness space. Move up and move back. So move up to share your perspective, and then move back to listen to others' contributions. And then the last one is, I encourage everyone today to practice radical inclusion. So inclusion is everyone's job, to be a good ally to everyone, ask, assess, and assist. Okay, so this is what our speakers are going to strive to do today, and we hope you as our audience will strive to do the same thing with us. Next slide, Dorothy. So 2 other key things. Yeah, perfect. Next slide, Dorothy. Dorothy is up there on the so when I look this way, she's up in the ceiling. So there is this concept called the sandemic. Can you raise your hand if you've heard of the sandemic? And Kevin, you don't count because you've heard me talk about it. Has anybody in this room heard of the sandemic? Dorothy, you don't count either because you've heard me talk about it. So what the sandemic is there was a lot of research that's come out recently, and when I say recently, in the last couple of years, that talks about the demographic drought. Basically, from 1971 on, we as Americans have not reproduced ourselves. So what that means is that we have 50 years now of less workers coming into the workforce. Okay, so because we haven't been able to replace ourselves, this is called the demographic drought, and then SAN means without endemic people. So this sandemic is a very real thing. And we in Wisconsin have been feeling this probably since 2016, 2015, because that's when the state started to talk about how we were walking into a worker shortage. That worker shortage has only gotten more exacerbated. Yes, it got a little bit better during COVID because we did have people relocate here, but in general, we still need several 100,000 workers to fill roles that are open in the state of Wisconsin, okay? And we know this because half of you in this room today have already raised your hand to say you're having a challenge finding workers. So a lot of people like to think this whole idea of a sandemic is literally, it's a thing, it's a phase, it's a trend. In 5 years, we'll be fine. It's not. And that's the thing that's most chilling to me. Yes, there's AI, there's all kinds of cool tech coming that will help us, but we still don't have the people power, okay? And as I said, we're here today to talk about people and how to engage the people so that if we don't have workers, if we don't work well with our employees, we won't have a company, we won't be viable, right? And that's kind of the road of sustainability. So it is my pleasure to introduce our 4 amazing panelists. First of all, before I tell you about the panelists, I'm going to tell you about how we're going to go. Today, we're going to have a Q&A session with the 4 panelists and Lisa. We're going to talk about key topics that we think are super important to help normalize the conversations around these topics. And then we're going to finish today off with examples and things you can all take back to your companies. If you have questions throughout today, please raise your hand. We want this to be engaging. We want to help you. We want to share our knowledge and information. Our first speaker is Dorothy Johnson. She is virtual, so Dorothy, you can see Dorothy up on top. Once the slideshow is done, we'll see Dorothy on this big screen. So Dorothy is the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Generator, and they are also a Wisconsin-based certified B Corporation. Yay, B Corps. Mm-hmm. The next speaker is Kevin Kane. Kevin is the Chief Economist at Green Homeowners United, a woman-owned social enterprise in the city of Milwaukee, doing really cool stuff. Our next speaker is Melinda Morella Olson. She is the Senior Director of Sustainability Solutions at ZeroMe. And Melinda is doing some pretty cool stuff with technology. I mean, talk about technology, AI. She's going to tell us more about that and the cool stuff she's doing. And then Kayla Rigi, who's now married, who has a new promotion. She's now the Program Manager of ESG at Kohler Corporation. I've known Kayla a really long time. So we're so happy to have Kayla here, to have all of our speakers. We have great diversity of people on our panel from age and background at different companies. So I'm hoping that we're going to have an amazing conversation today. So we are going to start our conversation off. I have notes here with a question. And 1 second. I have too many notes here. Thank you for your patience. Okay, our first question is, and I'm going to direct this to every speaker, and we're going to start with Dorothy. Please take about a minute to tell us about your role, your company, and the work that you do at high level, and then talk about how your company does engagement. Dorothy, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you for all of those, all that intro, Lisa. I'm happy to be here. The question, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Can you tell us, give it in 1 minute, can you tell us about your role, your company, and the work that you do tied to engagement? So how does engagement show
100%.
up?
No problem. So Generator is a Wisconsin-based accelerator. So it is our business to support emerging entrepreneurs in startup companies to get them network, access, support, mentors, and things of that nature. I was specifically brought on board about 14 months ago because venture capital is not a diverse industry, not a diverse market. Only 2% of capital actually goes to women and people of color. Which is a devastating statistic to have in 2023. So it's intentionally my job to be sure we are diversifying our portfolio in regards to race, place, gender, sexual identity, and things of that sort. So we're a nationally ranked venture capital firm, gold tier. But we also take great pride in being a B Corp company and doing things the right way, not just culturally, but also in a sustainability sense.
Wonderful. Welcome, Dorothy. Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Kane at Green Homeowners United. We're a residential energy efficiency firm focused on energy trade ally, trying to figure out how to make the residential energy efficiency world better jobs. Disproportionately, the residential construction market, small firms, not necessarily great jobs, often people who are taken advantage of. And we are trying to work to make sure that these kind of jobs have good pay, good family supporting benefits, and are directly helping upgrade homes to fight climate change right now.
Thank you, Kevin. Welcome. Kayla.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kayla Rigi. I work at Kohler Company. So we have 3 different lines of business currently. We have our kitchen and bath, our energy, and then our hospitality business. Sustainability looks very different in all of those. So excited to talk to you all about that today. My background on the team, I've sat on our enterprise sustainability and social impact team my entire career at Kohler so far. And I recently moved into an ESG focused role. Big buzzword. We can talk a lot more about it.
Thank you, Kayla. Welcome, Melinda.
Hi, Melinda Morella Olson. Excuse me. I work for US Venture in the Breakthrough division. So Breakthrough is a supply chain technology company. Even more specifically, I've been working on a product called Zero Me, which you heard a little bit about at the intro. We'll talk a lot more about today. But the whole goal with Zero Me is engaging employees in your sustainability mission. And it provides a platform to do that, both a platform for the consumer, which is the employee, and also for the employer with really easy digestible dashboards to understand your employees' emissions and hopefully being able to incorporate that into your sustainability strategies. So it's been an internal tool for a while, and we're looking to commercialize in 2024. So
as you can hear from our 4 panelists, such a diverse background of companies, all doing really amazing things. What unites our panelists is that they're all doing what I'm calling social sustainability or work within the employee engagement sector. They just view it from a very different lens. So we prepped for the session today, and during one of our prep calls, we came up with a list of our panel's best practices. And so we're going to unpack those best practices. So the first best practice that we discussed was listening. So how do you know if there's a problem, or how do you know what people think? Well, you have to listen, right? I mean, I know it's basic, but we're going to get back to the basics because so much of this, I think we take for granted or we forget. And sometimes we as humans like to make things more difficult than maybe they need to be. So I'm going to ask Dorothy to talk about how she listens to her workforce and what are some of the tactics she uses to listen to them.
Yeah, no problem. So I piloted this rollout from scratch. I'm the first person in my company. They've been in existence 11 years now. I was the first hire to specifically work on diversity, equity, inclusion, and social impact, right? So when you're creating something new, where do you start, right? A good step 1 is always to listen. So first we capture feedback. We were already doing cultural surveys with Culture Amp, and they were the long, probably 30-minute style. But I also implemented a shorter version of a survey, these quick temperature checks. So your style of listening can come in a wide variety of ways. I won't give the short list so my fellow speakers can speak to some other ones. But one easy way to listen is by way of survey. As also a sociologist and someone who gauges a lot of feedback, survey is very, very common in the social sciences. And that's the field we work in.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dorothy. Kayla, could you tell me how you at Kohler listen to your workforce?
Sure.
And also tell us, how big is your workforce?
Very big. We're almost 40,000 associates globally.
So 40,000 associates around the world, operating in
Yes.
how many countries?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have the answer to.
Okay.
I
A
don't-
lot.
A lot of countries. Yes, we have over 52 manufacturing locations globally. So I think the big thing to think about is listening looks very differently, right? Like if we're looking to survey our whole associate base, Kohler does that. So we have something called the Glint survey. It's an associate survey. It's a culture measurement essentially for us. So we have sustainability and social impact added in to that survey. And the nice thing about that is being a manufacturing company, one of the challenges we have is accessing some of our associates for feedback sometimes, right? Because they're working on the floor and they don't have time to access computers and things like that. So the Glint survey is something that the company mobilizes for manufacturing associates to take as well. So they can actually give us their insights. Some of my colleagues in the room will definitely know once we get the survey back, the information on our team, we will page through every single comment and we will look for what are the trends that we see, we categorize them, and then we operationalize strategy to meet the gaps that we're seeing from our associates. So that's one way. Another way from a DEI standpoint that we really tend to listen in is something we call inclusive conversations at Kohler. So these are conversations happening within teams, specifically across the organization. We have essentially different groups that are mobilized within the businesses to have these conversations with associates, but also down to top executive leadership. We are going in, our CEO is going in to the manufacturing plant and sitting down next to manufacturing associates and asking them about their experiences at Kohler and the culture at Kohler. What can we improve? What can we do differently? And what do we do a really great job at? So we have kind of different ways we're doing this, but I would say that listening does look very different whether you're looking to get local or kind of the global perspective of culture.
Amazing. Could you imagine David Kohler comes to your office and says, I want to listen to what you have to say today? I mean, to me, that's priceless, especially if we're talking about you're operating in a developing
Right.
country. I mean, that's amazing. So awesome. Again, I'm so proud of all of these speakers, the cool stuff they're doing. Melinda, you are next. Could you please tell us about the cool things you're doing to listen?
Yeah, so I'm going to speak in the context of Zero Me specifically. I mean, we've got US Venture, who's our parent company, and then Breakthrough, who's a division, but if we're thinking about Zero Me specifically, I'll stay in that lane. In the process of developing that homegrown solution, we did a lot of listening to our internal customer base, as well as a few external focus groups, surveys. So surveys have been mentioned a couple of times, but really understanding before, during, and after the development process, what are people thinking, feeling? What are they wanting? Why would they engage in something like this? So being able to do that plus user testing once there was something to test has been extremely important in us understanding our own employee base and what they're hoping to see from a solution like this. Additionally, the app itself serves as a feedback loop. So when our associates are inputting their information, where their sustainability interests lie, what types of carbon reduction projects are important to them, where they want to see efforts focused, that's a constant feedback loop to the administrators of the platform on the sustainability team to be able to go in and say, hey, our employees really care about this. How can we incorporate this into our sustainability strategy?
Awesome. Technology. Amazing, right? Technology and employee engagement all in one place. So Kevin is with the smallest company at the table. Could you tell us, how do you engage your workforce?
Yeah, we're a little bit smaller. There's about a dozen of us at Green Homeowners United. Again, we're a residential energy efficiency firm. Our workers are going into people's houses and insulating attics, replacing windows, insulating basements, sealing air leaks. It's really, while it can be kind of dirty, it's also the kind of green improvements that we have to do if we really want to take on carbon reduction goals, is upgrading pretty much every residential home in the house, in the country. And so for us, it's really important that we are training a workforce that's not really there. There really are no residential apprenticeship programs in green. They don't exist, not generally. And so what we're trying to do is working with the state, our colleagues of the Laborers Union and others to explore how are we developing this. And since we're starting in a field that it's existed, weatherization isn't new, but the sort of strong emphasis on making this energy efficiency, high performance homes, making homes more energy efficient, creating good living wage jobs, we're developing it on the ground, on the job, really. And so when we work with our workers to say, here's how you put in a window, it's also really important to us to say, here's the window's impact on the carbon reduction that this house has to have and where its role is and everything else that house can do. So as we like to say, there are master plumbers, there are master electricians, but there is no master insulator at this moment. And so we need to develop this workforce if we really do want to upgrade all these different homes. And for us, that is directly on the ground, both in a classroom setting for our workers, but on the ground, on the job, showing directly why it matters and not just giving them a work scope that says spray foam this wall.
And what Kevin hasn't said is that he also listens to what his workforce says, because in many cases, Kevin will be on the job site with members of his team. And so when questions come up, it's almost like a mentorship program.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm putting words in Kevin's mouth, but Kevin
No, that's
and or Cedric, your program manager, are there on hand to help younger workers, and you have several Gen Zers in your workforce.
Oh, I should mention all but one of our workers are either millennial or Gen Z. So we're really trying to prioritize the people entering this field, not just entering construction, which is generally an older industry, but saying like, I'm not just someone in construction, we're on the front lines of fighting climate change, directly upgrading the buildings right now, and giving them that sense of pride that they're not just swinging a hammer, they really want to enter a green or blue-green field, and this is directly giving people a chance without needing a college degree to do it.
So as you've
Hey,
heard
Lisa,
today.
can I jump in there?
Oh, of course, Dorothy, go
I
ahead.
think Kevin made an incredible point that when we're talking about diversity, it's not just racial. What he's talking about is generational diversity. And right now there's 5 different generations in the workforce. And those generations, they talk differently, they communicate differently. The way they were drywalling 20 years versus the way they're drywalling now, those are all things that Kevin's going to have to navigate. So as you have diversity, equity, inclusion conversations, be sure to even think outside that scope of race, and that diversity just means all the wonderful ways that we are different. So don't get stuck with that American racial hat on. Feel free to take that off sometimes and think wide and widespread about what diversity means at the highest level, and don't get pigeonholed just into racial diversity. I try to make sure that gets said when I'm on panels.
Thank you, Dorothy. We appreciate that. All right, so our second question, now that we've heard all these great ways to engage your workforce and to listen to them, the next question is, how do you digest and explore that information? So how do you take what you heard and then transform it into what you're going to do with it? So we are now going to start with Kayla, actually, with this one. Kayla, could you please tell us how Kohler, or how your team digests and informs your work, explores what you're doing?
So, I mean, I think in some cases this comes to your listening mechanism as well. So, for example, when we look to really drive innovation, we talk about diversity being a huge component of a necessary component of innovation. If you truly want to create leading edge products, services, solutions, you have to have the minds and the bodies of the customers and the people you're trying to reach designing your products or designing those solutions. So we have something at Kohler called iPrize. I love iPrize. It is our Shark Tank of Kohler Company. It's where we allow our associates to come up with ideas and then pitch them to executive leadership. So in about 2 weeks, we have our iPrize finals this year. This is basically a time where all of Kohler, all our executives, our associates are invited to attend this meeting, and it's a live pitch. The entire meeting, it's just different teams pitching their concepts to leaders. So for us, this is a way to really like take in and digest concepts and then mobilize and move them into the business. We are trying to commercialize ideas. So this, I think, is a great way that Kohler, we're not only listening to our associates and hearing their ideas, but we're acting on them by providing incubation funding and providing resources for them to actually commercialize their concepts. So something that's really cool that we've been doing for about 5 years now, the iPrize program. But in addition to that too, like I talked about our survey for sustainability, where our team is taking this information and we're creating strategic plans from this in partnership with the businesses. So the session before this in Workforce is really talking about, well, who are the people doing sustainability work at companies? And the answer is not just the sustainability team, right? It's all the people that are in the business. And our goal is that those people can be empowered to do this work in the future. They might not even need us, or we become a center of excellence. And so we're really working with those teams saying, hey, this is what we heard in your business. Here's an opportunity to create an action plan or strategize around how we improve this for the next year. So we're really able to work in partnership with those key leaders and then the key areas of the business. For example, our hospitality business, like I said, sustainability looks very different there. The same goals that we're setting for some of our manufacturing operations, they don't translate to that business. So we have to work more in partnership with those leaders to develop those goals.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Kayla. So Kevin, you had mentioned briefly before green skills, and the session before this one talked about and unpacked that there, according to the Manpower Group report that came out last year, there are 775 green and or green blue skills that are going to be associated with current jobs that are out there that are not there right now. So in the next couple of years, these green and blue skills are going to be there. And it can be tied to any type of job. So Kevin, talk to us about how you're digesting and taking this information that you learned from your workforce, and then tell us.
So the timing of this is really important because the work that we're trying to do now is about to be magnified many times over by the Inflation Reduction Act and all that is coming to help upgrade millions of homes across the country. So what we're trying to learn is not just what is pertinent to our a little bit smaller staff, but to prepare us for what's coming. And as far as working with the Department of Workforce Development to explore, can we create a residential apprenticeship program or pre-apprenticeship program that can work together with partners in workforce development agencies and with laborers union. But the green jobs that we have to do, yes, they're going to be exciting things like solar, but they're also going to be things that maybe aren't as exciting, like replacing toilets and adding insulation in attics. That stuff, I don't want to say matters more. I have my opinion on that one, but we have to do them. And so training workers today, we could go to your 50-year-old carpenter and try to get them to want to do some of these works, or we can try to get people who are 24 years old and are trying to figure out how to get into fighting climate change right now, have them start in insulating in attics and work their way up to eventually they might be working in multifamily buildings, leading crews, becoming energy assessors themselves. And we have talked to municipalities about today's energy assessor could be tomorrow's building inspector, because a lot of those are aging out as well. But furthermore, we also see green jobs and green skills beyond just construction, but also in areas like realty, mortgage lending. We work a lot with realtors and areas around green mortgages. I myself have one myself. I know Lisa had too, where when someone's buying or refinancing or trying to figure out how to improve their building, they can do it in an energy efficient way that both unlocks rebates, tax credits, and the chance to look different than other people in this industry. And so it's an exciting time to be upgrading buildings, but also to develop the kind of workers who work in and around residential commercial settings.
And you're also exploring partnerships with different sectors, which I think is, again, really important. Let's talk, Melinda. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the partnerships and things that you've been exploring through your role?
Absolutely. It's kind of self-servingly hoping to go after Kayla, because your iPrize comment is something that we do at our company as well. And if you aren't doing something like that with your employees, I highly encourage it. The ideas that people come up with have become some of our strongest business plans. So definitely recommend that. But back to technology and Zero Me. So I was asked to sort of speak on this question to the market drivers for something like Zero Me, and having an app that has a feedback loop to a company, as well as engaging a workforce and sustainability goals. And what we've really found is that Scope 3 emissions can make up over 90% of a company's emissions, and it's data that's really hard to get at because it's not in the direct control of a company. So really looking at those category 6 and 7 employee related emissions, it's very challenging. If you're working on any of this for your own companies, you probably are already finding that. So having a mechanism to secure some of that data is really kind of that doesn't really exist in a holistic fashion in the marketplace. Consumer demand, we know that 80% of consumers are willing to do something differently if they know what they can do differently to impact climate change. So as consumers move towards more sustainable brands with eco-friendly products and practices, that's really kind of key. We've talked about it a lot, but workers under the age of 35, 71% of workers under the age of 35 have cited sustainability as a value that they think is important when they're looking to find a company to work for. And as employees are increasingly more focused on finding employers that align with their values, 71% in the sustainability side is a big deal for companies to be thinking about. So that's kind of our take on that question.
So they're digesting all of this amazing data that we are all hearing about and seeing, and they're bringing into their organization. Now, Dorothy, let's wrap it up, because I know you are doing so many amazing things at your organization, and you told me that you interact with all 123 of the employees at Generator. So tell us how you're taking what they're telling you and digesting it and exploring it.
Yeah, great question. So I have to always be mindful as a practitioner in the middle. So I have my leadership, but I also have our entire workforce, and they don't always agree. I don't know about your companies, but in my companies, they don't always agree. So I have to be that translator in the middle. So I have to get the raw data from survey, but I also, as Lisa was saying, I intentionally, in my own will, I go to develop relationship with all 122, me being 123 folks. It takes relationship. And what Lisa's saying about getting back to the basics, it's no magic wand for DEI or sustainability. It's really getting in there, understanding your organization, understanding your workforce, and then working together for a better answer. So Lisa, I do that a couple different ways. I get our raw data, I aggregate it and abbreviate it so my leaders can digest it. Because as startup founders, it was just two lawyers, Joe and Troy from Milwaukee and Madison. And so they're really sensitive about this company. It's their startup, it's their baby. So they don't want to hear raw, anonymous, and negative feedback. So one of the first things I did was eliminate their access to the raw data points to aggregate it. So I do it in a couple ways, but I can tell you there's no magical answer. It's really an individualized thing by company, by industry. If you're nonprofit, for profit. So honestly, there's no good answer, but you got to get in the work. And then the work and the people and your leaders will navigate you to what your next step should be.
So Dorothy brought a nice point up here. She talked about being a navigator. So sometimes the sustainability professionals, social sustainability people, HR people, operations people, we end up in that middle role, right? And I think she dropped some really great nuggets of wisdom here. Don't always share with everyone all the raw data. Like that's priceless. I'm going to use that. That's very good. Because I think too, sometimes we get into this data mindset of share everything and that people can draw conclusions from that data. But a lot of people aren't trained. Dorothy's a social scientist. I'm a social scientist. We were trained to analyze that data and then tell stories from it, but not everybody is. However, everyone today is now being expected to do that. Right. So I think it's taking a step back again and figuring out your organization and seeing what makes the most sense in your situation, in your group. So the next question is, how do you and or your team act to implement? So now we listened, we learned about how we're digesting this information, we talked about partnerships and bringing in external knowledge. Now, how do you act? Okay, so Kayla was looking at me, so I'm gonna let Kayla go first. Kayla, can you tell us how you act at Kohler?
Yes, absolutely. So what I like to think about with action is we all know that in sustainability, there's so many shiny objects that we can chase. So it's first a matter of deciding like, where do you want to focus, right? And so I'm thinking from like an internal driver, outside driver aspect. So thinking about like ESG regulation, right? Incoming regulation where you're going to have to be adhering to this, or in order to be, we talked about talent, attracting the next generation of talent. This is not a differentiator anymore. It's a baseline requirement for a next generation of talent. So if you're not doing it, then it's going to put you at a disadvantage business-wise anyways. But so thinking about those things, thinking about customers, right? So I was talking to our survey team, and we actually, during the last session, I saw our job posted for an ESG reporting analyst, because we have customer surveys coming in at alarmingly high rates that are related to ESG and sustainability. It's a great thing to see, but it's something that we have to be prepared for to be able to act and do. So I think like assessing, the groups that you need to listen to, your employees that you need to listen to, your customers that you need to listen to, that's a mechanism for funneling the work then and piecing that out and framing that out. And I think for us, we've seen also looking at incoming legislation, but also funding opportunities, right? So the Department of Energy has had some great funding opportunities. So our team has acted on trying to operationalize around that and get those opportunities brought in so we can continue to drive innovation and set ourselves apart in the industry. And then looking at also, not only the funding that's available, but the customers and what they're asking for. We're being asked for survey information that we can't easily get right now. And so we need to look at our data systems and look at upgrading or getting talent in that can help us start sorting through some of the raw data so we can have better aggregated answers to these questions. So action can look really different depending on what the needs of your company are. If you don't have a sustainability strategy, your action is get one. If you have a sustainability strategy and you need to know what to do next, then your action may be listening into the market and your customer needs and the associates that you have. I would also say that it makes such a difference when you're talking to people and you're thinking about action, where you sit with them, right? Right now I'm sitting in front of you, I'm telling you what to do. But if I'm sitting next to you, alongside you, in a circle with you, and you're co-creating action together, that's where I think you will see the biggest impact for your organization, is when you're co-creating with those stakeholders that need to be seeing the action driven as well.
Awesome sauce. Melinda, can you tell us how you act or how your new tool is acting?
Yeah. Well, so the data that's collected through the platform really helps our sustainability leaders understand what's happening, right? So we're able to see, for example, 40% of our workforce doesn't use reusable water bottles. This is a lame example because like who doesn't use reusable water bottles right now? But we're able to see that and then say, okay, well, maybe that's an area of opportunity for us to make an impact. Maybe part of our sustainability strategy this year are 4 campaigns where we get people reusable water bottles. We also know that maybe we've got a subset of our employee base that's really into composting, and that we're getting that data through the app because it's behaviors that people are tracking or saying that they engage in. And we have these people who are already doing this in their homes. Maybe we can spin up a group that helps us do it at the office and reduce food waste in the office. So the type of data that's being collected really can help drive some of the strategy and help determine how we want to act on our carbon reduction efforts as a company, because we're able to collect that information through what's being done through the app itself.
Wonderful, and that's in real time too, which I think is amazing. Dorothy, can you talk about how, sorry, I have to look at you up here. You're on the screen. Dorothy, can you talk about how you're acting and putting programs into place based on what you learned from your workforce and then from being the navigator in the middle?
Yeah, and I know definitely being in the middle, but we also know that these traditional structures where us decision makers are on top and the people are on the bottom. Lisa, you'll probably love this because social science tells us to flip that model on its head, right? Where the people make the decisions. So I actually serve my ERGs where I put my ERG leaders and participants on top. I listen to their feedback and then I go execute their feedback. So I actually put myself on the bottom of that hierarchy and then I serve them up. So that's a really, really good way. If you're still in companies and structures where all the decisions made are at that executive level, there's no buy-in, we didn't ask anybody, we didn't consult anybody, you have a problem as we progress into years forward. If you still have that model where we're just a tight circle of decision makers, we don't ask anybody, we don't consult anybody, that's not good business. I want to be here to tell you that. So you got to serve your people, and sometimes you got to put yourself on the bottom and serve up. I hope that makes sense.
It does. It can, for everybody who doesn't know what you said ERG or BRG? Is yours a business resource group?
Oh, Dorothy,
Oh,
you're
you're muted, Dorothy. Dorothy, you're muted.
Got it.
Okay, so yes, it's,
ERG. Lisa, would you like to explain because you're in the room?
yeah, so it's an employee resource group, is that right? Okay, yes, okay. So an employee resource group, or you guys call it BRG,
Business
right?
resource
A
group,
business resource group. So what these are, they're groups that are set up within a company to, okay, this is Lisa's words, so Kayla and Dorothy, feel free to correct my language, but create a safe space for different types of employees who may have a similar interest or similar background. And so, for example, I know, Kayla, I've heard you talk about
And their allies.
and what?
And their allies.
And their allies, yes. Well, there's a pro-LGBTQ.
Correct. Yeah, we have about 10. We call them BRGs. I think we tried to be really intentional with the naming of them because it is absolutely a group for connection, community within the organization, but it's also intended to inform our business. So exactly to Dorothy's point about listening to groups, we have had direct, essentially CEO conversations with our top BRG leadership teams and then the CEO, and that informs business strategy. So not only are they doing events and getting together, and they have a very formal infrastructure and strategy for their group specifically. They have their own self-elected leadership teams, but then also they are meant to inform the future strategy of our business holistically. So we're using them as a tool, as they should be. It's great value and insight for the organization too.
Well, and what's interesting, when you all go after lunch this afternoon, Angela Russell, who is the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for TrueStage, which is where we are in this building, she'll be doing our lunch keynote. And when we were prepping with Angela for this call, she was explaining to Jesse and I that the BRG groups here have been priceless because they've actually helped change the forms. Like, for example, insurance forms, were changed so that most insurance forms all have just 2 names on it. And Angela's a Black woman. So Angela's like, well, I want to have 6 names listed on this insurance form because as a Black woman, I want to support my niece, my nephew, my cousins, when if something were to happen to me. And all the forms only had 2 names. And so what they found here is that the majority of African-American employees were not using those forms. They're not taking advantage of the insurance benefit. And so, and Angela, I think she might be talking about this afternoon, but it's just really interesting because it's things that you may not think think about, right? You know, most people think about if you're going to do an insurance form or a retirement plan, 2 names, your 2 children, right? So most people think, I don't have children, right? So like, maybe I want to put 6 names on it, who knows? But it's just opening that discussion. And then what happened is they saw how that changed employee behavior and employees choosing to take advantage of that program, which is a benefit to them, you know? So that's a very simple way to do engagement, you know? So I think
Yeah,
these business
Lisa,
research.
if I can, I'll add another thing is why have those groups, right? They are a lot of work, they are a heavy lift, but the reality is it is more attractive to talent to join your organization. You get more robust talent because you're offering not only a safe space for them to grow and share their thoughts, but it's also professional development for that business resource group leader. They may have leadership teams. So it's also a resume builder, which also results in talent retention. So keeping that diverse and robust talent inside of your organization, which also is profitable. So it extends the bottom line. So not only is it good, it's a good feeling for belonging, it also is good business to have these spaces.
Thank you, Dorothy. I appreciate that. And she's right. And I think you'll see most larger companies, Kohler does this. Clearly, TrueStage is a very large company. They're doing this.
US Venture.
US Venture does this. So Kevin, let's talk about your small company and how do you, well, and I think it's really important for us to see the difference though between multinational companies and then a small, you know, woman-owned business in Milwaukee. So Kevin, how does your team, how do you take these and implement projects and programs after you've listened to your workforce?
And to be clear, I get to represent the organization. I am not the majority owner of that's why we were able to say that. But so what's exciting in the green building space a lot of times is what is being done on building energy codes, making new construction better. And here in Dane County, we've seen a lot of new construction and making it more energy efficient. But the majority of buildings are old. 60% of buildings in this state were built before 1980. And just taking Sauk County, just north of here, 89% of buildings were built before 2000. So we have to work on old buildings. But what's nice is that the work on the new buildings and the research behind it can inform what we should be doing, but we got to test it on the ground. And so that requires this positive feedback loop between us and the workers doing this work, between the research, the policy advocates, the workforce, and other efforts that are trying to figure out how to make the focus on energy, for example. We want to test and get that feedback. So for example, we were doing a lot of energy assessments and the incentive programs kept telling us focus on the attics. Well, we would, but we would still get homeowners saying my house still feels cold. And so based on our energy assessments and the work that our workers were identifying, it's like, well, these basements have no insulation. And all houses built in Wisconsin today are now required to have it. So why are we not insulating the basements on old homes too? Or we would find research that suggested that we should be sealing the ductwork coming off of furnaces because we're going to be retrofitting these old buildings with heat pumps, and that ductwork needs to be tight and effective at delivering that heated energy. But we're also discovering a lot of asbestos wrap. And so then we learned on the ground that we needed to start partnering with an asbestos abatement firm if we had any hope of really making these homes both energy efficient and healthy. But in the process, we had workers who were saying, I am so excited about learning this. I want to learn the next stage. So they went from being insulators to window installers to eventually, in some cases, lead abatement professionals, because they were like, hey, let's take these old windows out. Shoot, the majority of homes in Milwaukee are built before 1978. A lot of them have lead paint. And so we're seeing that this requires us to learn new things, but we also have to adjust it based on what we're seeing on the ground. So we have this feedback loop we're trying to impart to even more workers trying to enter this space.
Yeah, amazing examples from everyone. So the last one is, let's talk about measurements. So now we listen, we digest it, we create a program or plan, and then we want to measure it. So how do we measure? What is the best way for us to do that? And Dorothy, I'm going to go to you first for that.
Yeah, the reality is it's individualized to each company, each industry, each sector. So it's an in-house conversation amongst leaders, employees. Also, if you are struggling with this and you don't know where to start, shameless plug to get a consultant. Lisa's a consultant, I'm a consultant. We also are learning and growing in this work, whether that be DEI or sustainability. Some of us are in-house, like myself and other folks on the panel. But Lisa, a consultant, I also consult. Sometimes it's a third-party consultant. But the reality is it depends. But for us at Generator, how we measure is we got together and we said, what's important? And we based on our mission. Generator's mission is to be the best partner for our community to invest in its best and brightest. And that's an inclusion statement. So our question is inclusion. So who's arriving? How many women do we have in our founders and our participants? How many women are in our company at large? How many women are at our partners table? Also people of color, right? So we know that when there's a systematic issue, those issues are exaggerated with women and people of color, LGBT, things like that. So we found metrics, we agreed on metrics together to track, monitor, and manage.
That's very good, Dorothy. And so I have to say for the record, we're not promoting being a consultant today because we're here to showcase examples, because that's going against the WSBC policy, and Jesse would yell at me. So, but the reality is there are a lot of great professionals out there that could help. And Dorothy's right. I mean, if you're in a space where you're trying to figure this out and you're not sure what to do, we have a great group of businesses that are part of the Wisconsin State Business Council that can help you. You can learn from one another. I mean, I think the whole part is we're a community and we need to work together, right? And if something you heard Dorothy is doing, reach out to Dorothy following the session. Okay. So
yeah, I don't think it's a play. I don't think it's a play for me to get more business, because I don't know about you, Lisa, but I'm swamped. I think it's none of us are experts in this work,
yes.
Myself included, and I'm twice marginalized, 3 or 4 ways marginalized every day. The reality is nobody is perfect in this work, and we all need help, whether that be inside the organization or a third party company, but we need help. That's the key.
Yes, exactly. And this community that you're all a part of today, we're all here on this mission together. If you heard Jeff Thomas talk last night, he was well, he's a doctor, but he got the Thomas L. Eggert Forward Leadership Award, so it's a Lifetime Achievement Award. And Dr. Thomas literally said, he'll be speaking this afternoon, he said, it's not just your company or the government or the nonprofits. We each together, we have to work together. We're in this together. We're going to sink or swim together, right? And that's what we're here to do today. We're all resources to help you. And Dorothy is just an amazing resource that I love to refer people to because she's so knowledgeable. And because she's also working with founders. I mean, that's not to go off on how awesome Dorothy is, but she's working with startup founders through the Generator program, which is pretty amazing. If you're not familiar with Generator, I encourage you to check out their website. They've got a really cool, robust founders fund and programming for all different types of founders. And it's really spectacular work. And now we're going to come back to our other awesome panelists as well. And so I would like Melinda to tell us, how do you then measure? Because you've told us all about this cool tool, Zero Me, and how you're getting this like in real time data. So then talk to us about the measurements.
Right? I mean, like you just said, it's in real time information. So we're able to, through the data that's collected, measure everything. Again, in an aggregated, anonymized way. It's not like, Kayla, your emissions are X, stop driving a diesel truck or whatever. But it is that real-time measurement that can be acted upon, or at least planned for and acted upon. So if you go back to my lame water bottle example, you can see after this campaign, now 80% of our employee base, rather than the 60%, is using the reusable water bottle or whatever my numbers were. But you're able to see that additionally from like the habits perspective, as well as the overall emissions perspective. So like, hey, we're really looking to reduce commute emissions. So we're going to try and organize these commuter groups and see if we can get people to carpool or whatever your strategy is, right? Then you're able to actually see that information reflected back in the data dashboards that are provided through the app. So our teams can take a look at that to measure and then inform strategy in the future.
And I'm guessing that you do some pivoting, right? If you're doing things and then all of a sudden you're seeing data that's going contrary to what you wanted, there's which I think is also important in this work too. We all need to be able to pivot, right? Because nothing is set in stone.
If you wanted to take some time to go on and on about how awesome I am. I'm just kidding. Please move on. Please move on for the sake of time.
So here's the thing. I mean, to do this work, the previous session in this room, Erin Bauer who was the moderator. She talked about how to do this work. You have to be fearless and you have to be willing to disrupt and to stir things up. And so that's why, like, I'm just honored to be on this panel with be here today with this wonderful panel of leaders, because we're all disrupting in many different ways throughout our jobs.
Yeah.
All right. So Kayla, off
Yes.
to you. Tell us about your measurements.
Yes. So what I would say is if you're curious about what to measure, especially as we talked about all the shiny things, there's a lot that we can measure. Laura Kohler always says to me, well, we can't measure, we can't manage. And it's absolutely true. But you also can't manage everything. So thinking from the standpoint of like ESG and performing a materiality assessment, even if you don't do that formally, even if it's just like, hey, you're sitting your employees down and you're talking about what's our company mission, what's important, like Dorothy was talking about, what's important to us. And that's where you start to figure out, well, what are the measurements that will indicate that we're making progress on these things that are important to us? And I think for Kohler, using an ESG reporting framework has been a really great tool for us to understand what are we measuring really well and what do we have opportunities to get better at measuring, or are we measuring something and we now are bringing it to our attention saying, oh, there's a gap, right? We need to improve what we're doing. So using that ESG framework, I think can be really helpful, and just thinking about your business differently and thinking about sustainability differently. At the session before this, it was showing all of the key roles that are working in sustainability.
Mhm.
We're bringing in finance, we're bringing in legal, we're bringing in teams that typically a sustainability professional may not have been working with in the past. So we have to think about KPIs in those areas too. And I think ESG really challenges us to do that. But what it also does is it tells you what's the materiality assessment will tell you what's most important to your company, but also from the lens of your customers, your associates, all of these stakeholders that are really pivotal to the overall success of your organization, not just that top executive leadership team and what they think is most important. So doing a materiality assessment, however informal it needs to be, and then really trying to use some of the general ESG data that you're seeing from companies. We have DEI data, we have gender diversity data, we have all of the carbon data, the water data, we have all of it, but it's a matter of really buttoning it up and understanding what's most important to your company.
That's awesome, Kayla, and I love it. Again, bottom up, right? Or
Yes.
top, however you want to turn it around, right?
Yes.
So Kevin, talk about how you're dealing with measurements at GHU, at Green Homers United.
So we used to try to track energy usage in buildings. Unfortunately, our utility in our area made that much harder to do. So we can't as easily track the therms and kilowatt hours in our homes. So what we decided to really prioritize is to work on bringing more resources into the communities that most need this help. Disproportionately older homes are disproportionately held by people of color and older residents, many of whom are disabled. And so we work with the Office of Energy Innovation. We work with Focus on Energy. We work with a lot of different funds to try to bring more resources, grants, rebates, tax credits, fair financing into the communities that often felt shut out from this. And so it was important to us to figure out how much can we bring in services and revenue into neighborhoods that often weren't seeing it, who needed the most to gain from it, but are also we want to make sure that the workforce is from and looks like the neighborhoods that we want to improve upon. And so making sure that our workforce looks a lot more like those neighborhoods. We currently our team is about 40% Black. We're working to get beyond 50% on that. Our team is 90% union, in a union that is the only majority minority union in Greater Milwaukee. And so we are really trying to make sure that these are good jobs for the sort of workers who want to work in the neighborhoods they're from.
That's amazing too. Okay, like I said, everybody up here is doing just awesome work. And yeah, so let's give all of our speakers a round of applause. Okay, so per the time, I'm going to have each speaker give 1 minute of something, a take-home message, so something that you could do starting tomorrow. So when you go back to the office tomorrow, each of the speakers are going to give you one thing, and then when we finish that, if we have time, we will take a question from the audience, okay? So let's go. Melinda, you're looking at me. Why don't you go first?
Sure. Mine's just really simple. Don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. I think with sustainability, sometimes in D&I, we get like, we have to do it perfectly, or we have to have everything buttoned up and planned out. And my encouragement to you all would just be to do something. You probably are already doing something, keep doing something. Small stackable wins that add up to really great impact. So I don't have this idea fully fleshed out, or I don't have the perfect process, or I don't know what I'm going to do after I do X, Y, Z. Just start and let it evolve. Try something, iterate, test, do it again, fail forward faster. So that's my tip.
Wonderful, thank you. Kevin.
Learn every aspect of this work. Try not to tell anyone to do something you wouldn't be willing to do yourself. Try to learn it directly, because It'll build the trust with the team that is going to have to implement the ideas that we uncover and want to implement. And so you'll also learn a bunch along the way about maybe how to do it better. So learn every aspect of the business.
It's awesome to be a practitioner. Dorothy?
I love Melissa's a series of small victories, but since she took that one, I will go. Innovation requires diversity. To innovate, you must do something differently, whether DE&I is in your title or not. I really want to lift up Kevin because I'm so impressed by the work he does. And his title doesn't have diversity, equity, or inclusion in it, but he's driving equity for others every day. So innovation requires diversity.
Wonderful. Kayla?
I will say, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. That is my best advice. I just got yelled at for emailing our CFO the other day, but YOLO.
All right, awesome. So now, are there any questions from the audience? We have about a couple minutes for questions. Probably take 2. Yes, sir.
So I'm biased, but I work in talent development. And so a lot of the conversations I'm hearing you talk about, I think about how sustainability and DEI professionals are partnering with the HR side of the business. If you want to engage employees, I think they need a path for growth and development. But in a lot of organizations, especially large, but not just exclusively large organizations, there's a bunch of broken rungs. And we see a lot of emphasis on downstream metrics, like how many women or people of color do we have on our board or in our C-suite? But the problems start much earlier. And I'm wondering if anybody has stories or examples or practices of how you're helping close some of those gaps early so that you have that addressed upstream.
So just to clarify your question, you're thinking from like a talent development standpoint, how are we kind of helping roadmap out ways for associates to move into those jobs, whether it's sustainability or otherwise?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're in a talent development conversation, a calibration conversation, 3 managers are putting names on a whiteboard. Who do we like for this? In a lot of organizations, I'm the guy in the room and I'm putting people that look like me on that whiteboard. So are you tackling that, or how are you tackling that?
Okay, so our audience member, Monica, is going to share some insight.
Well, no, I was actually going to piggyback on that because that was my question about building capacity. And if there were examples of programs exactly to develop other sustainability leaders within those respective departments and functions. So I'm just quickly adding on to that.
I see Dorothy's hand.
Yeah, Dorothy, go.
Go,
Yes.
Dorothy.
I raised it virtually. And the reality is, we touched on it today. I heard YOLO, I heard disruption, but the reality is you have to call it out early. If you see a problem, each and every one of us has to be like, hey, that's wrong. Hey, that's not diverse. Hey, I think what you said right there was incredibly inappropriate. So it's actually back to basics. Like, you have to call it out. Like, hey, those are all white guys. You have to be able to say that. Somebody has to be able to say that. In my community, because of John Lewis, we say good trouble. You got to be brave enough to cause some good trouble in the right moments. Not later. Don't wait. You have to act in that moment. Don't wait and send an email later. Say, hey, I think that's inappropriate, in real time. You got to say, hey, we need more diversity right there. We need some more generational diversity right here. You got to be able to call that out early, be brave, and cause some good trouble.
Love that.
And that goes to this whole thing about what our role is, right? We are disruptors. You know, many of us, we are the point of the spear. We're early adopters of doing this stuff, right? And so it's going to be uncomfortable. It might be challenging, but that's okay, because the work we're doing is so damn important, right? And if we're not going to do it, nobody else is. So if you have a bad day, as many of you in this room know, call Lisa. You know, if you get into trouble, the CEO. You know, we have to do this. I mean, we have a moral obligation. We are in a climate emergency, right? And so all of us here at this conference are working together to make the world a better place. And we have to do it together. And we have to do it through the lens of co-creating a more equitable and just world. Because the biggest problem we have in the world is actually inequality. And the UN will tell you that if you dig into the UN's website. It's inequality. It's systemic systems of inequality that have been in operations for hundreds of years. So sorry, Lisa.
I think I have a good closing question. I think we're at time, but Lisa, I want to ask you why. Why do we have to do it?
Because if we don't do it, we're not going to be in business. Because I believe it was Dorothy, was it you? One of our panelists today said that if you don't engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion or adoption of social sustainability within your business, you're not going to be in business. Because the root of all of this is people, right? We know there's a problem. The pandemic is real. We know it's hard to recruit workers. So if we're not actually engaging our workforce and hearing what they want and working hand in hand with them, not telling them what to do, but working side by side together to forge solutions to the problems that exist, we're not going to have workers. Go ahead, Monica.
So, for example, I come from an organization that's formerly 150,000 employees.
Huge.
Our team couldn't be everywhere at once. So how do we build capacity or develop leaders of finance teams or IT teams or community teams that can be an extension of the ESG and sustainability work? Are there any examples?
Yeah, I can give you some. So our team, our enterprise sustainability team, partners with our EVP team from a communication side of things and a programming side of things. So they're pulled into if there's existing programming like iPrize, like when is that launching? How are they promoting that out to the organization? What tools can we give them? So my team will develop essentially comms assets that can go out to the EVP team that then can be pushed out through HR teams or anywhere across the business. I would also say that we have at Kohler something called Sustainability Champions Program. It's technically actually not a business resource group. It's its own group, and it's been organically grown by associates who are either just say, I'm passionate about sustainability, and or they want a career change at some point, or they are working on projects now, but sustainability isn't in their job title. So that's a group of about over 1,000 associates now. And we have a whole like internal SharePoint resources dedicated for those associates. And in addition to that, we're looking at bringing them in for projects. So like if our team needs help with work, I will need comms help for Earth Day usually. So our associates we can pull from that network to bring them in. Yeah.
So
Go ahead, Monica.
So is this voluntary or do you push it out? And as you push it out, have you prioritized your stakeholder audience?
It's a little bit of both, certainly voluntary. So there's part of our new associate orientation. You learn about sustainability and social impact at Kohler and then ways to get involved. So with the HR team, we're partnering to build out that training because it's so overwhelming when you come. There's just so much you have to learn. So there's phased training. So then the phased training can get more into later on. Okay, so now I really want to get involved. What do I do? Right. And so it's like a follow-up required training for those new associates, maybe like 60, 90 days in where they've settled into their role. Most of the time you're getting in this trial by fire. You're just focusing on your job. You don't have time to think about business resource groups right away, potentially. But so it's a little bit of like building the infrastructure from like a training side of things, but then also we'll try and leverage like town halls within the organization. If there's key events that are coming up or opportunities for associates to get engaged, we'll try and pull that into a town hall side. We also try and push our executives to directly present it versus our team to present it. So it really gives more of that permission for associates to do it. It's better to hear it from your leader. But I would say like training is something we're really trying to build, and then also leveraging that network of associates when there are projects that are needed to happen, and then also recognition. So internal recognition across the organization, we have award programs that are in place for all different areas of the business around sustainability and innovation that can really bring that as a core value within those little pockets of the business to continue to promote that growth.
So on that note,
Yeah, can I abbreviate that a little bit? She had all the words. She absolutely just killed that definition right there. But the reality is you have to make the case. You have to prove value proposition, return on investment. You have to make a proposal and somebody has to pitch it. So you got to build the case, return on investment. How much is it going to cost? How much is it going to save the company? So you gotta dive into the business case, and you might have to pitch, my friend. You might have to write a proposal and pitch.
So what I was going to say is Angela Russell. So I'm going to give you, so these are the announcements right now. So Angela Russell will be doing the luncheon keynote, and she will be doing that at 1:15 in the auditorium. So that's where we were for the beginning. I am 98% sure Angela's going to touch on the topic the two of you have just raised, okay? We talked about it in prepping for today. In this room at 2:45, there'll be a session called Taking Sustainability Beyond Your Operations in the Value Chain. Now, if you are super interested in all this employee engagement, workforce stuff, we're going to have one more session that Jean, raise your hand, will be moderating upstairs. So in the Sunset Room C on the 3rd floor at 2:45, come to Jean's session, which is case studies and developing community partnerships for workforce development. So it's going to be the final of our 3 sessions and how they all build together. The last thing is that when we're done here, lunch is being served. So some notes. Lunch is being served literally out there. Okay, and so what you're supposed to do, according to my notes, is that you're supposed to grab your lunch and then either meet up with some of your friends that you've met on the Rivet app, or go meet up with people you chose to meet up with. And you can eat in multiple places. So you can eat on this floor, the 2nd floor, or the 3rd floor. There's not one place for people to eat. Okay, so wherever you can find a cubby or a table, feel free to use that. Thank you for coming and have a wonderful rest of the conference.